In this episode we will visit Quebec, the largest province in Canada. However, most of the population lives in urban areas along the St. Lawrence River. The inhabitants call themselves Quebecois. I hope I pronounce it well. While the Dutch are calling themselves cheeseheads. So yes, every country has its particular names and it's always handy. The biggest part of Quebec is only nature and it's 41 times bigger than Holland. Yes, I cannot resist it. I keep comparing because we Dutch, we only can dream about so much space. In Quebec you can find an incredible amount of beautiful nature and of course the nightlife. However, I discovered that the national bird of Quebec is the snowowl. So ladies and gentlemen, we gonna paint a snowowl. My name is Michael Schutte and thank you for watching Painting the Island. Hello and welcome. Like I mentioned before, we're gonna paint a snow owl. But for now, there's only the big white nothing. But that is gonna change. So let's paint and have some fun. We're gonna start with a very simple sketch in gray tones. Normally I paint sketches in English red, but for this highlight colored bird, I thought gray might fit better. And you can hardly see it, but I made a very light sketch with pencil. It works for me a bit better painting for the camera. I always start with the eyes. I don't know why, but I think it's a habit. Then we do the contours of the head and pay attention. I don't do lines, I sketch, leaning my hand on the palette stick so that we don't have too much pressure. Then we slowly bring in the feathers. And that is the tricky part. They have to follow the shapes of the body, so keep an eye on that when you're busy. And yes, this birdie has an excellent feather pack, as it usually lives in the Arctic regions of North America, breeding mostly on the tundra, cold and windy. Actually, it's the only owl who has mainly white plumage. Males are purer white than the ladies. Oops. Most of the time it's the other way around. And as most of the owls sleep by day and hunt by night, this one goes by day and especially in summer. He eats almost everything he can get. He's not really picky, but he prefers lemmings and water birds. In the spring he is looking for a nice lady and the pair lays a large clutch of eggs, about 5 to 11. So yes, that's one big happy family. And I must say he's a bit of a rolling stone. He goes freely where he wants to go or where the food is. More important maybe, where the ladies are. So he doesn't stay on one spot and no, he doesn't like to bind himself to one girl. So we might say he is a bit of a playboy with his overwhelming white furry pack of feathers and his flamboyant manners. So we might say he's the leader of the pack and the ladies adore him. Anyway, he is pretty cool to paint with his naughty round the corner look in his eyes. But like I said, it's not an easy job to give all these feathers the right direction. Yes, it's always a good idea to make a kind of underpainting like this. You will encounter a few difficulties here and there and you know exactly how to handle those when you do the real painting. Let's make the eyes a bit stronger and also his beak. Later it will be hardly visible, overlapped by hairs and feathers. And I think it's time to make a nice background. So let's do a few more feathers and then we can mix a simple grey with a bit more ultramarine blue to create a cold atmosphere. And for this background I like to use the big 1-inch brush from Uncle Bob. It's a miracle how he did his paintings in those days in only half an hour using almost only this brush. Easy? No, not really. Try it yourself and you will see what I mean. To create a kind of early evening effect or mood, we can blend in a warm ochre tone. And then I mean yellow ochre, a bit of alizarin crimson and titanium white. This technique of combining cool colors and warm colors was a well-known technique of the Dutch masters. And if you want to know more about the mixing techniques of the Dutch masters, you always can hop in and I'll be happy to help. But this was surely one of the techniques. Remember? Cold tones against warm tones. And as we are looking for contrasts, we can make the space behind the head a bit darker, just adding a darker gray. Let's blend in the ochre tones a bit with a very light gray, and I added even a bit of orange to it. And as we can see, the contrast works fine. And let's make the corners a bit darker too. This will give the viewers the idea or the feeling that they are looking into the painting. While the paint is still wet, we can make it a bit more cloudy, just by moving the bristles in half circles. And we can even take a lighter tone of grey and paint some illusions of clouds. With a highlight we can paint lighter movements and see how it all goes. But I'm just playing with light and dark, try to keep it calm and misty. But we're losing the warm tones, let's add a bit more of the warm ochre tones. And that is better. And now we can add a few more light tones for a misty effect. It sounds all complicated, but actually it's very simple. And after all, I would like to see more dark in the corners just to create more contrast. So let's be brave and paint a few soft dark clouds with a velvet brush. We can do the same at the other end of the canvas, but we keep it all soft and misty. So we're not gonna add too many aggressive clouds over there. Like I said, it's just to create some contrast. Then with the same grey tones we can make some upward movements to create a far away forest in the distance, and we still use the velvet brush. We don't use any pressure at the end of the brush stroke, and then the paint will really melt into the wet underlayer. That's the benefit of working wet in wet. We can use different tones of grey, like dark, middle and light, and fade it in with soft blending brush strokes, but not too solid. Down below we can go a bit darker, and later we will come back in that part for more cool effects. Let's fade it in a bit more, and then I will paint a few trees behind the owl. I had so many requests of viewers and students to show how to paint more trees, so I thought, okay, this might be a good occasion. So with a small round brush we can make little crisscross movements and push the bristles into the wet underground. Nothing special. And we keep it very loosely because it's all far away. With a lighter tone we can paint some very light trees who are further away, and this is a cool technique to create more depth into the painting. And look what I do, my hand is leaning on the stick to take the pressure away. And we make short crisscross strokes, like I said, around a tree trunk and try to make them uneven. And on the other side of the owl we can do exactly the same. And yes, it's gonna get cold here, we're gonna paint a lot of snow. But that will come later. First, a few more trees, a line, some crisscross strokes, and ready. Don't spend too much time on it because it's gonna get probably hidden behind a lot of mist. And our friend, well, he doesn't care. He doesn't care about freezing temperatures. He feels the best by -32 or lower. So no, you won't see him in the tropics. And it is a hard worker. He hunts day and night in the Arctic summer as it doesn't become dark. And the sun shines 24 hours. It's very strange for us, but it happens. So he will work through and doesn't sleep a lot during that period. Let's create more mist behind him. And we can do this with a very light grey with soft round brushstrokes. On the foreground we can create a kind of snowy hill and just make some indents with light and dark. At this time we mix white with phthalo blue. This will give a wonderful cold atmosphere. And I said it before, don't try to get the result you want in one layer. It's not gonna happen. It doesn't work in oil paint. We always have to think ahead what will be on the next layer. So for now we make a rough underground. And later we can paint some exciting subjects like stone, sticks or other cool stuff. So let's do a few more brush strokes in light and dark, and then we're gonna leave it for now because it's getting too muddy. Let's give our birdie a branch to sit on. And I had the idea to give him a kind of fallen little tree. It might be tricky as the paint is still very wet, but we always can try. With a combination of black and burnt sienna, we push the paint into the wet underlayer, and actually it's not wrong. The greyish tone which we get is very natural. I plow my way through the wet paint and continue to the place where the branch or tree is digging into the snow and disappears. We have to play with dark and light and improvise with the colors. I cannot say it's this or that color, you just have to go for it. Below it's darker, very simple, and upwards a little bit lighter. And if you go from there, it will be not too hard. We can go upwards with the roots, and it was a small tree, but the roots are surprisingly high, and this will make it so interesting for our painting. If you ever painted with me before, you know I love to use the knife. With a little roll of paint on a knife, we can scratch over the wet surface and give it this natural rough layers. Then with a mix of white and phthalo blue, we can scratch over the top of the branch and give it a layer of snow. As my viewers and students want to see the technique of painting a tree again, I would like to paint another cute little tree in the distance. With a fan brush and a dark grey tone, we can paint a little tree over there. With a small round brush, we can try to add some snow on the branches. We play again with dark and light, and you have to see for yourself how light and how dark you want it. We have to consider that this is background, so we have to keep the colors soft and misty. Let's do a few more little twiggies, and later we can always give it more light when it's dry. But now it's all soaking wet, so it might be tricky, but on the other hand, the paint flows nicely into each other. We can do a few more frozen branches, but I think it's better to leave it alone now for a while till it's all dry. Let's work on the birdie. We start with the eyes. If the eyes are good, that is already half of the portrait, said the famous Dutch painter Rembrandt van Rijn, and I agree. Whatever portrait I do, I always start with the eyes. The eyes of these owls are on the average pretty yellowish, so we can use an ochre tone. And as the owl is sitting in an evening mode, we can make them a bit darker by adding some grey. And we can do this especially beneath his eyelids. The pupils are pretty big, and I still want some more dark on the eyelids, and that's more like it. Later we can bring in the lights, but for now we let it dry. Let's give our friend some hairs, I mean feathers. We start with a middle tone grey and move slowly over his head to make a foundation for the light feathers, and we can use a small round brush. And from here we can add more dark feathers. We start with a middle tone grey and go slowly a bit darker, so it looks like he cut more hairs on his head. But as you will understand, it's all feathers. And it's an impressive feather pack. And wonderful too. And still with the small round brush we slip the feathers into the wet paint, which is a bit tricky, but with some exercise it will work, no worries. And as we need more contrast for the light feathers, we can add a mix of grey and ochre tone. And now he's gonna look a bit like a clown, but no worries, it will all change at the end. It's the same in the area of his nose or beak. We have to add more grey. Now let's take a little break and let me show you some Quebec history. Let's talk a bit about Samuel de Champlain. The man was the key to French expansion in Canada and also known as the father of New France. The life of this adventurer, explorer, seaman and so on reads like an exciting novel. Champlain founded Quebec in 1608 in the 3rd of July. So we might say Quebec is one of the oldest cities in North America. Samuel was brave enough to make tons of travels in boats like this. He explored even the Bay of Fundy and selected St. Croix Island as the expedition's first winter settlement, and after a harsh winter he established Port Royal. He went even as far as Cape Cod. But first let's go back in time and take a look how the first settlement must have looked like. Here is a short impression. During 1608, Samuel Champlain built a habitation which you still can admire at the bottom of Cape Diamond. The first houses were built with bricks, and as the French wanted to feel a familiar atmosphere, you have the feeling that you walk through an old city in French. Bonjour, Monsieur Samuel, comment ça va?
Bonjour, garçon. Oh, la vie in my la tête. Too much drinking last night. It was my birthday party.
Oh, alors, well, yes, that can happen with too much wine. Now let's take a look in the harbor. The port of Quebec is an inland port. It is the oldest port in Canada and the second largest port after the port of Montreal. In the 19th century, Quebec was the most important port in the world, and it played a major role in the development of both the city and of Canada. In 1863, more than 1,600 ships went through the port, transporting almost 25,000 sailors. It was during this era that shipbuilding industry grew considerably in Quebec City. And this is how it looks like now, big, bigger and bigger. However, I don't know what I would like the most. For the painters, I would say, put me back in the good old days. Samuel de Champlain, I said it before, the story of his life reads like an exciting book. To save some time, I did his left leg off camera, otherwise you see me painting lines for 20 minutes and that must be quite boring. More interesting is his left wing, a magnificent, powerful machine with an interesting mosaic of feathers. His claws are lucky enough a bit hidden in the snow. And I say lucky because that saves a lot of time. Really, I don't like feet, claws, paws, toes, horse hooves, fingers and so on. They look on a painting surrealistic, so whenever I can I try to hide them. And in this situation I love the snow. But there are a few decorations and the feathers on his feet have a few ochre tones also. Then we have to do the other side of his pajamas. In the shadow we can use a darker tone and pay attention that we go in a round circle over his right leg, so not too straight. And yes, it's quite work, but very rewarding. This beautiful pattern of feathers has a cost. Considering he's flying over frozen landscapes, it's a kind of visual camouflage, so his prey hardly can see him flying in between bushes and trees. The flight of these snow owls is certainly impressive, and I can imagine very frightening too for the victims. The wings are huge, they have a wingspan of 1 meter 50. The claws are impressive too, 10 killing knives, sharp as razors, and for the prey there is no chance to escape. In short, this owl is the perfect hunter. And you cannot imagine that this guy has enemies, but he has them too. He has to fear the snow fox and the timber wolves, who steal and eat the kids when they have a chance. Let's put a bit more snow on the tree trunk and let it drip down so here and there and just enough to hide his claws. You know how I think about that. After that, we can decorate the roots a bit more with snow to make it more outstanding. We can paint the roots with a small round brush, and for the snow we can use a phthalo blue color. First a darker tone, and upon that a lighter tone and even a highlight. In between the roots we can put some more snow and see how much you want to add to it. Just go ahead and use your fantasy, but always start with a darker tone and upon that a lighter tone. And it's always cool to let the snow drip down on several places. Maybe the sun has been shining all day, so it started to melt, and then we get interesting drip downs. And don't forget the indents, it makes it super natural. On the left side we can add a bit more highlight snow. The cold polar tundra wind blew the light snow up to the roots, and this is always a fantastic effect. We've done a lot of work. Now let's take a little break. Before we say goodbye, I would like to show you our Academy of Music and Art in Qualicum Beach. I teach there music and art, and my wife Els card making and scrapbooking. I would love to show you my paintings just to get some inspiration, and I understand that for a lot of you Qualicum Beach is not next door, but if you happen to be on Vancouver Island, just hop in for a chat and take a look around. And of course you are always welcome if you need some advice about materials, maybe color mixing, or whatever you want to know about art and music. My sweet wife Els is a magician with paper, and she shows a great selection of scrapbooking and paper art. And don't forget that we offer a wide range of courses in music, painting, scrapbooking and card making. Yes, there is a whole new world, a whole new creative world for you right at your fingertips. Our steady viewers might know by now that I love to support the North Island Wildlife Recovery Center in Arrington with my paintings. This place, founded by Sylvia and Robin Campbell, is a lovely retreat for wounded birds and other animals who need recovery and help. Also a lovely place for inspiration. So if you ever visit the island, take a look in the center and admire all the wonders of nature. Enjoy! Yes, it's indeed a great place for inspiration and new ideas. We always love to walk around and say hello to our friends like Sander, the owls and other birds. On the foreground we can play with dark and light, and we use the three tones of white and phthalo blue, dark, middle and light. And upon that we can play with highlight tones to make it more lively. We can add a few frozen grasses, frozen weeds, and the fan brush is always a great help with that. The right technique is no pressure, very light touch and not too much details. I always love to play with the snow and add little twiggies, bushes, stones, grasses or whatever makes this frozen world lively. Our birdie has no fear of frozen toes. -40, -30, he doesn't care. He can handle that without shoes. His winter coat protects him even more. At night he blows the feathers up, and on his skin is a comfortable warm temperature. Now this inbuilt heat pump is on the average working with all birds. And then this little guy in the far distance. He had the time to dry, and now we can decorate him a bit more with light snow, and we do this with the same phthalo blue colors. Now the old layer will peep through the new layers, and this gives a great effect. Oil paint is transparent. On top of all the tones, we can add on the left side, which is the light side, a few branches with a highlight tone. And this will make it really outstanding. If we do this on the front, the branches will come towards us. It's an optical effect. Let's do a few more highlights at the front below him. The cold tundra wind is blowing up the snow right in front of the tree, and this will give a wonderful effect, especially when we work with the highlights. We are almost done. Now let's take a look what we have created. Looking pretty good, but yes, there's always that but. We miss something. And I think we can add a piece of a neighboring tree leaning over at the left side of our painting. It will function like a frame so that the viewer feels that he or she is looking into the painting. So let's dive into that, but before we do this, let's take a little break and watch the story of the trapped snow owl.
Guys, let me introduce my beautiful wife. She is a bit whiter than me, but for the rest, she is lovely. I love to fly over frozen forest and tundras, and yes, I love to fly low like a ghost, and nobody sees me coming, and this is how I catch my praise. But one day I didn't pay attention and I flew into a trap. Now these good shepherds are trying to save me and cut all the wires off my body. Oops, don't cut my toe. Oh, and there's another wire around my wing. Hey, that hurts, be careful. Well, she's doing her best. I won't bite. Okay, I think I'm clean now. You can let me go. Yes, I'm grateful, but don't tickle me. Don't tickle me on my wing and ticklish. Stop it, or I will bite you. I warned you. Oh, look at me lying here as a lame sheep. It's embarrassing. Okay, I had agreed for a photo shoot, but not too long, okay? I want to go home. My wife will be so upset when I'm late for dinner. Okay, you can let me go now. I said you can let me go. Or do I have to bite you after all? That's the way to go, girl. Thank you, thank you. Oh, I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky. Yeah.
So, finally home again? Chasing the girls, I guess? Well, boys, you better put off that camera, because I will have a word with the lord of the house.
Oops, the poor guy is having a hard time. First in a trap, wrapped in iron cables, saved by good-willing rescuers, coming home, and finally getting a punishment by his wife, who thinks he had an affair with a girlfriend. Yes, life can be hard. In the meantime, we are busy building up a tree who stands beside the canvas, but his branches are sticking out into the final composition. The technique is simple. With a very dark earth green, a bit mixed with black, we push the paint downwards, and it gives the right dark tone for this composition. We are looking into an early winter sunset, So it's more or less a silhouette, and it will cover up the side of the canvas, and I said it before, it holds the viewer into the picture. It's an old optical effect what the Dutch masters used all the time. With a small round brush we push the bristles forwards, and I think we can go a bit deeper. And I told it before, I had many requests for an explanation of the tree painting techniques. That's why I will do this in a slow pace so you can follow easy. Don't forget to use a good medium, and if you don't like mediums, you can use different oils like walnut oil. For instance, this is a very smooth and odor-free oil which works just as well. It takes only more time to dry. And there is linseed oil, a very nice product. Actually, all oil paint is done with linseed oil. We can also use nowadays a water mixable oil paint, which works great too. Nothing is more friendlier than water, right? And absolutely odor-free. I must admit, when I saw it the first time I had my doubts, but it works great. So there is a wide range of choices, and if you want more information, we'll be happy to inform you and give you all the good advice you need. I must say that my students are very happy with these products, and the most important is that we have no smell of odors. In the meantime, we can put some snow upon the branches, which can be tricky as it is so very wet. You can always wait till it's dry, but the good thing is that the paint will melt into the wet underlayer, and this will give it all a natural flow. The snow is sinking into the wet branches. And as long as we know that, we are prepared and you cannot go wrong. When you think it's enough, we can do a touch-up with a highlight tone as the last sun rays are touching the surface. And we can use for that a white, titanium white, with a little touch of dark yellow hue. And this color is already some of the orange, which will work great with a beginning sunset. With a small round brush and your hand leaning on the stick, we can work really fine at the end of the branches. And I told it before, the right technique is almost no pressure on the surface, and then you can paint incredible fine twiggies and whatever you can see in a tree. And I was tempting to do another tree on the right side, but I think it's a bit too much. And here is an interesting subject that almost everybody forgot. The secret of a good painting is that it has an escape. And now what is an escape? I will tell you. An escape is a part in the painting that the eye of the viewer can get lost in the distance and develop his or her fantasy. And yes, it sounds a bit strange, but if you study old masters, and you will learn a lot of that, you will discover that most of the real good paintings have a so-called escape. It's just an opening in the composition, whereas actually nothing. To my regret, I see that this is a totally forgotten technique and nobody cares about it. But maybe it's a good advice, bring it into your paintings, and this will separate you from all other painters who don't know about this forgotten technique. Our snow owl is done. I hope you liked all the new techniques, and let's be careful with this beautiful owl. And if you ever have the chance to see it flying, enjoy! our snow owl is ready to fly high in the sky looking for new adventures. I hope you enjoyed the show. Check out the website. Till the next time, and keep on painting.